I never thought much about fate or destiny. Life was just a series of choices and consequences, nothing more. That was before I met him. Before I stepped into that dimly lit bar on a rainy night, seeking shelter from the storm and my own thoughts. Before I looked into those eyes that seemed to know everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. My name is David. I'm nobody special. Just your average office drone grinding away at a soul-sucking job to pay the bills. A few months ago, I was at my lowest point. My girlfriend had left me. Work was a nightmare, and I felt like I was drowning in a sea of mediocrity. That's when I found the Crossroads. It was an unassuming little bar, tucked away on a side street I'd walked past 100 times without noticing. Something drew me in that night. Maybe it was the warm glow of the windows, a beacon in the dreary darkness. Maybe it was just my desperate need for a stiff drink. Either way, I pushed open that heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The interior was cozy, all dark wood and soft leather. A handful of patrons were scattered about, lost in quiet conversation or their own thoughts. But it was the man behind the bar who caught my attention. Tall and lean, with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes. He looked up as I entered, and a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Evening," he said, his voice warm and inviting. "What'll it be?" I settled onto a bar stool, shrugging off my damp coat. "Whiskey. Neat." He nodded, reaching for a bottle on the top shelf. "Rough day?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Rough life." The bartender set the glass in front of me, those blue eyes studying my face. "Want to talk about it?" I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was the alcohol or the comforting anonymity of a stranger. But I found myself pouring out my story. The breakup, the job woes, the gnawing emptiness I couldn't shake. He listened attentively, nodding at the right moments, offering sympathetic sounds. "Sounds like you could use a fresh start," he said when I'd finished. "Have you considered looking for a new job?" I shook my head. "In this economy, I'm lucky to have the one I've got." The bartender leaned in, his voice lowering conspiratorially. "What if I told you that Hargrove Industries is looking to fill a position in their marketing department? Something that would be right up your alley." I blinked in surprise. "How did you know I work in marketing?" But more importantly, how did you know about the opening? They don't have anything listed." He shrugged, that enigmatic smile returning. "You'd be surprised what people let slip after a few drinks. Anyway, you should look into it. I have a feeling it could be just what you need." I left the Crossroads that night feeling lighter than I had in months. True to the bartender's word, I found the job listing the very next day. 2 weeks later, I was starting my new position at Hargrove. Better pay, better hours, and a team that actually seemed to value my input. I returned to the bar a few nights later, eager to thank the bartender for the tip. He greeted me like an old friend, already reaching for the whiskey bottle as I approached. "Congratulations on the new job," he said, before I could even open my mouth. I paused, momentarily thrown. "How did you—" He tapped the side of his nose. "Good news travels fast. I'm glad it worked out for you, David." A tiny alarm bell went off in the back of my mind. Had I told him my name that first night? I couldn't remember doing so, but I must have. How else would he know it? I pushed the thought aside, chalking it up to a whiskey-hazed memory. Instead, I focused on expressing my gratitude. We fell into easy conversation, and I found myself opening up even more. There was something about this bartender, Jack. Something that compelled me to want to confide in him. Over the next few weeks, the Crossroads became my regular haunt. Jack always seemed to be there, no matter what night I stopped in. He was an excellent listener, offering advice that was startlingly insightful. More than once, he steered me towards opportunities or away from pitfalls with an uncanny accuracy. "You might want to avoid the seafood special at Chez Marcel tonight," he said one evening, apropos of nothing. "I hear their supplier's been having some quality control issues." Sure enough, the next day the local news reported a wave of food poisoning cases linked to the restaurant. Another time, he casually mentioned that I should take a different route home. "Construction on 5th Street," he explained. It'll be a nightmare. I heeded his advice and later learned there had been a major pileup exactly where I would have been driving. At first, I was grateful for these little nuggets of wisdom. Jack was well connected, I reasoned. He probably heard all sorts of gossip and inside information from his diverse clientele. But as the weeks went by, the coincidences began to pile up. His knowledge became more specific, more personal. "How's your mother doing?" he asked one night. "That new medication helping with her arthritis?" I froze, my glass halfway to my lips. I never mentioned my mother's arthritis. Jack's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those blue eyes. "Didn't you? Must have slipped my mind. I hear so many stories, you know. They all start to blur together after a while." I nodded slowly, but a seed of unease had been planted. I began paying closer attention to our conversations, noting the little details Jack seemed to know without being told. He always had the perfect advice, the exact piece of information I needed. It was as if he could read my mind, anticipating my thoughts before I even realized them myself. One night I arrived at the bar feeling particularly low. I asked out a girl I'd been seeing recently but got turned down, and it had hit me harder than I expected. Jack took one look at my face and wordlessly poured me a double. "She wasn't right for you anyway," he said softly. I looked up sharply. "Who?" "Jessica," Jack replied. "The one you met at the bookstore." A chill ran down my spine. I had never ever mentioned Jessica's name to Jack, nor had I told him about my visit to the bookstore. "How do you know that?" I demanded, my voice shaking slightly. Jack's smile never wavered. "Oh, you know how it is. People talk. Word gets around." But I knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that I hadn't breathed a word about Jessica to anyone since it had all just started. I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over my untouched drink. I need to go," I stammered. Jack's eyes followed me as I stumbled toward the door. "Take care, David," he called after me. "And watch out for that loose step on your front porch. Wouldn't want you to have a nasty fall." I ran all the way home, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached my house, I stopped short. There, in the dim glow of the porch light, was a loose board I'd never noticed before. I stared at it for a long moment before carefully stepping over it and locking myself inside. I stayed away from the Crossroads for a week, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. But the recent incidents had made it clear that there was something profoundly wrong about Jack. Finally, unable to resist the pull any longer, I returned to the bar. Jack greeted me as warmly as ever, but I noticed a new intensity in his gaze. "I was beginning to worry," he said, sliding my usual whiskey across the bar. "Thought you had lost your way." "Oh, and David, congratulations are in order, I believe." Puzzled, I asked, "For what?" "Your sister," Jack said calmly. "She just went into labor. Beautiful little girl. They're going to name her Emma." As if on cue, my phone began to ring. With shaking hands, I pulled it from my pocket. My brother-in-law's name flashed on the screen. I looked back at Jack, who raised his glass in a silent toast. My brother-in-law's excited voice filling my ears, he told me about my new niece. Emma, just as Jack had said. My blood ran cold. Even I did not know my sister had been expecting. She wanted it to be a surprise, apparently. "What are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Jack's smile widened. "Just a humble bartender, David. A good listener, that's all." I shook my head, my hands trembling. No, this isn't possible. You know things. Things you couldn't possibly know." He leaned in close, those piercing blue eyes boring into mine. "Do you really want to know the truth, David? Are you sure you can handle it?" I swallowed hard, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I needed answers. "Tell me." Jack's voice dropped to a whisper. "I know everything, David. Past, present, future, every choice, every consequence. I see it all branching out like a great tree." A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat. "You expect me to believe you're some kind of what? Psychic? God?" "Nothing so grandiose," Jack replied. Think of me more as an interested observer. I like to keep things interesting. My mind reeled, struggling to process his words. But why me? Jack's smile turned sad. Because you asked, David. No other reason. You're not special. You were not chosen. You simply asked the question. I stood up so quickly my bar stool clattered to the floor. You're insane! This is insane! I'm leaving and I'm never coming back. The other patrons began to notice me. I saw the same haunted look in their eyes that I knew must be in mine. We were all addicts, hooked on the terrible truths Jack dispensed. Why? I sobbed, clutching my glass like a lifeline. Why tell us these things? What's the point? Jack's face was impassive as he polished a glass. Knowledge is neither good nor evil, David. It simply is. What you do with it, that's the real question. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper. I'll make you a deal. Walk away now. Never come back to the Crossroads. Forget everything I've told you, and live your life in blissful ignorance. Or stay, witness the truths of the universe, beautiful and terrible as they may be. The choice is yours. I stared into those fathomless blue eyes, my heart pounding. Walk away? Forget? How could I? How could anyone? I whispered, sealing my fate. I'll stay.